Believe it or not, the amazing digital circus has a finale that actually didn't fail at all, even though the internet spent weeks screaming about its theatrical release. I mean, people are genuinely upset because they wanted a giant action-packed escape sequence, but looking back, the choices made in episode 9, remember, was entirely inevitable once you treat the characters as software copies instead of trapped humans. Honestly, expecting a standard Hollywood rescue mission in a complex psychological thriller like this is like getting mad at a business class flight because they won't serve you a tray of processed mystery meat slop. It's just slightly missing the point. Just slightly. Looking at how Pomni and her companion only had a brief 9-episode runway, the finale served as a deliberate claustrophobic constraint rather than a pacing mistake. I mean, when you have characters stuck in a digital loop, asking to have the story dragged out over 50 episodes so they have room to breathe, which, let's be honest, will just be milking it, dilutes the psychological pressure. If you over-explain every corner of the void, the tension simply evaporates, which means you're left with a generic cartoon instead of a tight psychological thriller. It's like trying to stretch a tense 3-minute escape room experience into a week-long camping trip. It just doesn't work. So think about the way episode 9, Remember, divides its narrative cleanly into Jax's self-contained tragedy and Kane's systemic reset for a very specific thematic reason. Blending these two storylines would have muddied their distinct emotional wavelengths, which meant that Jax's individual irreversible collapse would have been watered down by Kane's institutional recovery. Honestly, keeping them separate prevents the show's dark reality from being wrapped up in a cheap, unearned happy ending. But how did a minor character's private hobby become the ultimate leverage for his toxic control? The sounds just fight each other. What's crazy is how Jack abstracts off-screen in episode 9, Remember, because sudden, quiet psychological collapse reflects the reality of deep-seated depression far better than a loud spectacle. I mean, when people reach their breaking point, they don't usually put on a giant theatrical performance before slipping away. They just disappear quietly when no one is looking. Animating a massive dramatic transformation scene would have turned a tragic mental collapse into cheap sensationalized action figure fodder. It's an incredibly raw and honest way to handle a character's final defeat, even if it leaves you feeling a bit hollow. Trying to redeem Jax with the neat arc in the amazing digital circus would have been a mistake, because some people are simply unable to accept help. I mean, forcing a happy ending where he suddenly apologizes would have been incredibly dishonest to Gango. We have all met that one person who is so deep in their defensive habits, or rather, their complete terror of being seen, that they will literally bite your hand off if you try to help. But why did the creator decide that a permanent tragic abstraction was the only possible conclusion for Jax? Well, sometimes a tragic unresolved ending is the most honest cautionary tale you can write. Viewing Jax's transition into an abstracted monster, it serves as a compassionate, deeply tragic metaphor rather than a harmful trope. I mean, his entire defensive persona, the pink overalls, those pink overalls, is essentially a mask to hide his vulnerability and gender identity because he carries the deep shame instilled by his mother's rejection, meaning that her private hobbies were just a way for her to escape her own shame. His collapse is a warning about the danger of living as someone you're not, which means the abstraction is a cautionary tale and not a punishment. The kitchen just gets destroyed.
It's too late.
People who claim Ragatha has no purpose and could be removed from the series with zero changes are completely missing her role as the group's emotional baseline. I mean, without her desperate attempt to perform sanity, the entire social fabric of the circus would have collapsed long before Pomni ever arrived. Removing her is like trying to run a chaotic kitchen without the one exhausted line cook who actually keeps track of the orders. years, everything just collapses into total slop. She is the structural buffer against Jax's cruelty, acting as the literal glue holding them together. People are completely missing how the Soma theory is utilized in the amazing digital circus to elevate the narrative from a generic escape the maze plot into a profound existential question about identity. Once we learn the characters are merely digital copies whose real-world counterparts are continuing to live happily outside, the entire struggle changes. This choice shifts their goal from finding a shallow physical door into confronting whether their copied emotions have actual value. Discovering you're a duplicate is like finding out your favorite childhood photo was just a clever Photoshop edit. It still represents something real. There's actually a realistic reason why Kane is easily accepted back by the cast in the amazing digital circus, because they are setting boundaries with their environment. I mean, Kane is essentially a floating set of chattering teeth acting as the simulation's operating system, which honestly a hilarious visual and is about as useful as telling a computer, hey, please stop running. How can a system built entirely on arbitrary code parameters allow for genuine human-like forgiveness? The characters do not magically forgive his past action. They pragmatically accept that they are stuck in his system and chose to manage their relationship with him to survive. This was a mature, quiet peace treaty. We need to talk about how Kane's Wi-Fi access is framed in the amazing digital circus because it features technical logic that actually makes perfect sense for a creative AI's evolution. Critics really got hung up on how an old computer in an abandoned CNA office building could connect to the network, but they are applying real-world hardware elements to a virtual sandbox. The connection is a metaphor for a local program searching a wider database to update its parameters, which meant that Kane was finally learning about humanity to build a better world for them. It was a perfect logical progression. At the end of the day, episode 9, remember, delivers a cohesive, deeply resonant conclusion for this independent animated project. It proves that the show didn't fail at all, showing that even if we feel like software copies stuck in a theatrical release of our own lives, we can still make our own space. I mean, seeing Pomni wave at the screen for the last time genuinely made me feel a quiet, unironic warmth for these characters. The digital cage persists, but so do we. That's pretty much all I have to say about that. Well, maybe more, so subscribe and you'll be getting more.